Hello, this is Jeremy from Continuous. We create intelligent automation solutions purpose-built for financial institutions. Our tools are known for amplifying back office team members by focusing their efforts as we strip away their tedious work through our automation platform. Today, we're going to dive into Permission Assist. Permission Assist is within our InfoSec solutions, and it's specifically built to help credit unions with identity and access management, or IAM for short. Permission Assist does this first by organizing user and permission data across your entire ecosystem worth of apps in order to streamline various different IAM processes while making sure that we're keeping compliance or regulatory bodies satisfied. Now, in this demo, we are going to focus on three major areas. First, we're going to start off by talking about how we can sort and organize that user and permission information or data that I just talked about. We're then going to touch on modeling ideal access for a specific role. And then we're going to talk about how we can leverage that in order to facilitate onboarding or termination of an employee, or what some people might call provisioning. Now, before we dive into the demo, let's quickly review how Permission Assist has a practical approach to identity and access management so that when we're going into the demo, it kind of makes sense how we are doing these different things. So really quickly here, as I share my screen, you are going to notice that over on the left-hand side, there are boxes that signify applications. Now, within Permission Assist, you can have as many different applications as you want. We have credit unions that have a few applications in here. On the other extreme, we have credit unions that have hundreds of applications. All we want you to know at this point is you can go as far down this rabbit hole that you want to go whenever you want to go there. But the key thing is we will support your entire ecosystem if you want, or we can start off on definitely those critical applications that are taking a lot of time or have the maximum kind of security risk, if you will. Now, this next set of yellow arrows here, I want to explain this set of yellow arrows more than the entire rest of this diagram, because this is where we really take a different, or what we would call a practical approach to identity and access management. By that, I mean, we believe that within Permission Assist, the best place to source user and permission information is from your third-party applications themselves. And we do this through our plugin model. So basically what will happen is for each one of these applications, you'll have a plugin, and that plugin will connect to that third-party application in the best way that we can technology-wise to source that data natively. And that word there, native, is super important. The reason that it's important is because, unfortunately, many of our applications are not what we call integration friendly when we're talking about user and permission data. But if we do have something nice like an API, by API or modern interface, that could be things like Active Directory or even Symitar because of SIM Exchange. But if we don't have something nice like that, we're going to use, again, whatever that third party natively has. And the reason that that's really helpful is because by going native, we can streamline bringing in that information with minimal effort from any humans. In other words, we can automate it as much as possible. But number two, because we are working on information security things, it's really important to keep the chain of custody from that source system into Permission Assist as clean as possible so that we can make sure that we're not adding additional information security controls. So again, that's kind of one of our key aspects is we're trying to take a lot of that effort off of you on trying to bring in, organize, and interpret this data. And when we're bringing it in, we're really trying to go deep, and we're trying to organize it in a way that we can use it more streamlined or unify it across all of these different applications. I'll show you what that means here in a little bit when we get into the software. Now, up on top here, you see three little people that we call identities. I'm not going to go into identities very deeply, but just know that not only is it kind of a core function within identity and access management, but we use this as a center tentpole that we can start to rally around. In other words, we want to connect a lot of these different applications and their users to an identity so that we can say something like, hey, John Doe is an employee, he has access to all of these different applications type of thing. So that allows us to really have a more global look at what we are seeing as far as that specific access. All of this information, once we get it into Permission Assist and it's organized, we basically consider that our foundational IAM data. And from that foundation, we can now streamline various different IAM processes. Again, today we're going to touch on a couple, specifically modeling access and a couple of provisioning type of things. Now, whenever we do any of these processes, it is important for us to be able to generate different artifacts to prove this stuff out to auditors or compliance, regulatory bodies, that type of thing, or be able to have reports that we can use to either reduce risk or increase kind of our security profile, IAM profile type of thing. I won't go into a lot of those things in depth, but again, I just wanted to give a quick overview of how we like to do that within Permission Assist so that when we get in here in just a moment, it will make sense. So really quick here, the first thing that we want to start off with now that we are in Permission Assist is we want to jump up here to bringing in this data, because again, that's the foundation and really what allows a lot of these other things to happen. To do that, I'm just going to go up here to Manage. I'm going to go down to Applications, and I want to jump into a couple of different extremes. The first one I want to look at here is Active Directory. Now, when I click on Active Directory and I go over here to Settings, what you're going to notice that we are just connected to a domain controller. In other words, we're talking to that API, that modern interface. As soon as we put in this information, it's going to start syncing up users, security groups, nothing else that we really need to do here. Now, before I go into Symitar and kind of explain that a little bit, I want to jump into Fedline. And the reason I want to jump into Fedline and I want to look at these settings here is this is probably a great example of a piece of software that doesn't really allow for much interaction. And in this case here, not only can you not partner with the Fed, but the Fed makes changes whenever they want, all of those type of things. So you have to tend to be reactive when we're talking about user and permission information. On top of that, reactive kind of stance, we also gather all of this information through the subscribers and roles report, which is a PDF. It looks like this. So what does Permission Assist, or specifically our plugin, do in this case? In this situation, basically we're going to start off by, as soon as this PDF is uploaded, we're first going to validate it. In other words, we're going to say, does this report look like we're expecting? Does it look like somebody manipulated the report? Or does it came directly from the Fed? Things like that. We want to make sure first it's quality because, again, we're working on information security things. After that, we're basically going to go through this and we're going to change this from data into information. In other words, basically, we're going to go through it. We're going to say, here's the users, here's the permissions, here's the different modules, and we're going to convert it from this PDF into the security format within Permission Assist. So if I kept on jumping from application to application, what you would end up seeing is us sourcing this information different ways. You'd see us communicating to these systems in different types of methods. You would even see different security settings on various different applications depending on their security models. By that, I mean a common thing that we tend to see is, how does this third-party system handle disabled users, and what should we be doing within Permission Assist because of that information type of thing? Now, I'm going to really quickly jump over to Symitar, and I want to highlight Symitar in a little different way. So we do have various different options sometimes. So for example, with Symitar, we can be file-based if you want to do something like that. And you can see right here, we'll give you all the information on how to pull this information, where you can bring it in. And if you want to do something where you're not connected to SymExchange, you can do that type of option. But obviously, a lot of our Symitar clients love to do things like connect it into SymExchange, keep things easy. From there, really, in that case, you're just going to put in your Symitar SymExchange endpoint, rather, not Symitar endpoint, but SymExchange endpoint. Put in that information in order to connect to it. And as soon as you do that, we're going to, again, be able to sync up and do various different things through SymExchange so you can take a lot of that workload off of yourself. Again, we have lots of different options. If I kept on going through various different applications, you'd see lots of different ways we can do it or have options to do this type of thing. All right, so now that we have brought in this base level information, the next thing that I want to talk about is what we call entitlement roles. And basically what entitlement roles are is a way within Permission Assist to model ideal access. Now, really quickly here, I'll give you a little background and then I'll get into some real world examples. So in my example credit union, I have about 2,000 people. Within those 2,000 people, I'm going to start shrinking that down into who does specific roles, and I'm going to play around with financial advisors because I've just been doing some things in my demo environment with them. And you're going to see here I have 30 of those financial advisors. Now, as I click on this, what you're going to start to see is we have various different applications that we are saying we want to allow financial advisors to have access to. So I said Active Directory, LPL ClientWorks, and Symitar. Now, when I click on one of these, I'm going to get what the actual setup and usage of this entitlement role is for these financial advisors. So again, I have 30 here, but as I hover over this, you're going to notice that 9 of my financial advisors don't have access to LPL ClientWorks. Now I can drill into this if I want to. I can really look at what's going on. I can see over here who's missing. I can drill into that even further. And really what that's going to start allowing me to do is have some insights. But even though that's nice on the application level, the really awesome thing is we go super deep. Again, going back to once we source that information at a deep level, within Permission Assist, we can provide insights even on different roles, individual privileges, and all that kind of stuff. So even though LPL ClientWorks is kind of a simple application regarding permissions, you will notice that I can see what is the usage of all of these in here type of thing. Now, I think that this information right here is super helpful to have a conversation between 2 major players within your credit union that tend to struggle with that conversation. In other words, there tends to be a gap. And that gap is between whoever is managing the financial advisors from the business side. In other words, who really owns that job description and should be able to say like, hey, they can do this, but they can't do that type of thing. And then whoever is managing the security at these various different applications. Unfortunately, again, a lot of the times the business side doesn't really know the security or application system administration side or vice versa. But by showing the actual configuration and usage here, what that allows us to do is to really jumpstart that conversation. So if I go down here, for example, to Symitar, just to give a little bit more advanced example as we kind of go through this. So you're going to see here, now I just loaded this up, so I don't have any of my financial advisors within Symitar, which makes a lot of sense. But you can see, again, I have all the configuration and usage of what the permissions are set up today. In these next 2 columns here, these are really important for the people that are managing all of these privileges. So you can see over here, I have this configuration column, and within that column, what this is telling me is how do I want to configure my financial advisors to have access to Symitar? So because many of our systems have roles or groups, you are going to notice over here that I have these groups and I have a little number behind it. If I click on one of these numbers, I'm going to see here's all the 74 individual things that are currently configured within my Symitar. And as soon as I give them access to this, they're going to be able to have all of these different privileges or entitlements. Now, in this last column over here, this is what we call ideal access. And you can kind of think of this as results. In other words, through this configuration, what is the individual privileges or all that kind of stuff that they have access to? Now, down here, you can see that we've actually linked and we have all of this kind of inheritance or different layers of all of these privileges in here. So you can now have all of the different pieces that you need to have in order to not only see what things are set up today, but how do you want to configure that access and what is the end result of that access? And you can apply all of these to various different IAM processes. And that's why we love to say that entitlement roles not only help us to speed up a lot of these IAM processes, but they really help to mature our identity and access management program overall. And the reason that is because now we can say, this is our true north. This is how we want these various different roles to work like within our organization, and we can always compare or leverage these within these different IAM processes. Now, even though I think a lot of this stuff is cool, the last thing that I want to highlight here on entitlement roles is that this is a constant moving target for us. In other words, these things are changing on us all the time, and they tend to change on credit unions in two different ways. So the first way is you as a credit union, you're making decisions like, for example, we want our tellers to do cashier's checks now or something of that nature. Now, I'd argue that you can at least manage that frequency because you are managing that change control type of thing. So maybe that isn't impacting you a lot. But the second way that you get changes coming at you or that moving target is that all of these applications are adding new privileges and roles, all that kind of stuff all the time. But the fun thing here that we can do, since Permission Assist is cataloging all this information for you, is we can do fun things like say, show me new privileges I've never seen before. Now that's going to escalate, here's new things or different things that are coming up so that you can actually take a look at them. You can make sure that those key actors or players are involved in this discussion by elevating that risk of these new things. And whenever we make any of these changes, you're going to notice over here we have this little number. And if I click on one of these or remove one of these, you're going to see that number changing here. Now, if I go over here to this version tab, what you're going to notice is that I took a baseline of this back in the day in Permission Assist is when I first set it up. Over time, as these things have been changing, as we've been adding and removing applications, we've been changing what the role can do, all of that kind of stuff, we're going to summarize every single one of these changes. And beyond that, we're going to keep track of here's all of the various different privileges that have changed. Now we can commit this version, and that's going to say this is the latest version of what our financial advisor should look like. And again, we can now use that throughout Permission Assist in order to make sure that we are managing all of that change management or that moving target in a way that is also kind of streamlined within our IAM processes. All right, the last thing that I want to touch on here is a little bit of provisioning and how we can leverage these entitlement roles that I was just talking about in order to help us with provisioning. And in order to do that, I'm going to do a quick onboarding request, a quick offboarding request, and you kind of think of that as we hired somebody, somebody got terminated. And before we get into that, I just want to mention that we have these things called personnel events within Permission Assist. This aligns to, again, those more HR or life cycle type of things. But then we also have these things called access requests. And these are going to be changes to individual applications around user and permission type of things. So I'm just going to go up here, I'm going to hit request, and I'm going to start to do an onboarding. Now, when I do an onboarding, the way that this has been modeled is many of our financial institutions or credit unions, basically they have some sort of form, whether it's a virtual form or we're still doing paper, but they start to fill out. And the problem is they're going to get down to this area and they're going to say something like, I want to copy Sally's access. Or they'll list out applications and they'll say, check off the applications and maybe a little bit of role-based stuff within there. The problem with that is the people filling it out don't really understand, again, that security setup of all of these various different systems, kind of like what we were talking about in the models. So what Permission Assist did instead is we basically came in and we said, could we do something where they could just answer questions that they know? So for example, they're going to be an employee, what kind of department are they going to be in? What branch or office are they going to be in? Things like that, maybe their title. Now, as I'm filling this stuff out, I'm just going to continue on here, and then I'm going to point out a few things on this next screen. So instead of us saying things like, hey, here's the applications, here's all the stuff, what we did instead is we said, what are the various different entitlements that they for sure match our entitlement roles that they for sure match, or that maybe they have some optional things off of this information. So for example, in my credit union, anytime that I answered this question employee, I'm going to have a baseline entitlements for every single one of my employee. So that could be something like they're going to have access to Active Directory and they're going to be in the user security group type of thing. Then we usually layer on other things like what is specific to their job. So in this case, I set up a teller, but it could also include things like branch location and other things. And these can build up on top of each other to say this is the total current access that they should have access to type of thing. Then we're also going to have optional items. So maybe you want to allow people to say, can they have remote access or not? Those type of elements as well. Now, as I'm going through this request, you can do things like scheduling. I can say it's immediate if you want, which I'll just do for brevity's sake on this demo. And I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Now, as soon as I do that, so the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to take this personnel event, and that is going to get routed for different approvals. In my demo system, I set up a super quick and easy one where I basically said I have to come in here and approve the various different applications before we go on to the next step. Now, as soon as I do that, it's actually going to take these and split them out into those access requests. Those access requests can go through their own workflow and approval processes themselves. And whenever we do that, we really have kind of three major areas. So in this case, I didn't require any approval for Active Directory. You're going to see that I'm in this provisioning piece. When we start getting into execution of doing these provision activities, we have a couple of different options. So the first option is Permission Assist already has an integration into an approved method for being able to make these changes around users and permissions. So you can do that directly within Permission Assist. A second option, going into our continuous family of solutions, you can do IT automation through that or through things like PowerShell or scripts or things like that. So you don't have to require to using Permission Assist. You can actually use your own methods or some of our other tools that are available to you. Now, and then we do have a last option, which is if you don't want to do any of that, we do have manual tickets as well. So within those tickets, we'll tell you exactly how to set this up most effectively because Permission Assist understands that security model. So you don't have to dig around and look at it type of thing. Now, anytime you do this, you can do verification. So again, this three-step process, do you have an approval, execution, or provisioning of the work, and then verification type of thing. Now, whenever we do any of these activities, going back to it's important because we're doing IAM and InfoSec type of things that we're keeping an audit log. So we'll keep a track of here's people doing things, here's Permission Assist doing things. So you understand where all that is happening. And these will continue to check off as they're completed. If they get routed over to somebody in a different department, you can keep track of it. If it's kind of with a central provisioning team, you can track it type of thing. And again, you can do verification of all of this overall. So in other words, we can say, here was the original request, here's the actual activity that we did, and here's verification, whether that's a second person, whether Permission Assist is helping you that by bringing in those permissions. Now, real quick, I want to highlight a termination just because this takes a slightly different approach where if I go over here and I want to say that I want to terminate somebody, really in this case, we're just going to take all of that user and permission information and we're going to quickly look at it and say something like, what are all of the applications that they currently have access to? So we don't really care what their entitlement role was or how they've been modeled, anything like that. So in this case, I'm going to look at all these applications and I'm going to say, here's all the applications that they currently have access to off of our latest data. So let's go make sure that we're routing all of these where they need to go. Again, you can go through different approvals and all that kind of stuff, just like before. Again, the main difference here is that we're just going to leverage the data itself instead of being able to do some of these more advanced IAM things like modeling. All right, so from kind of the start of the demo, the three key things that we thought were really important to highlight. So first, bringing in this information and being able to organize it across your entire ecosystem. We dove into a couple of specific examples on bringing that data in. And then as we moved into kind of modeling access through our entitlement role feature, we dove into permissions a little bit so you can kind of see what some of that model looks like, even though we didn't go in very deep. But we did want to really touch on, here's how things are currently configured and usage of those. We wanted to make sure that we highlighted that configuration column so that we could understand how do people get access for those system administrators and results. While we're doing all of that, we really wanted to make sure that we touched on change control and making sure that we understand through permission assist that all this stuff is changing on us, and we really want to be able to support you in that specific challenge. And then we ended up with a couple of quick provisioning type of items of onboarding somebody and then bringing somebody through a termination. With that, that wraps up our time today. And I want to say thank you for spending some time today with us. We're really looking forward to digging in more and finding out the best way that we can impact your IAM program in a real way. Thank you very much and have a terrific rest of the day.